The transport ship Velhari's promise descended through the cloud layer of Station Kethmaros like a slow exhale, and Sergeant Dana Reeves pressed her forehead against the cold viewport glass and watched a world that had no business being beautiful make itself beautiful anyway. Kethmaros wasn't a planet. It was a platform, a military training installation the size of a small moon, constructed over 3 centuries by the Velhari Collective, a coalition of 6 species who had been mapping, cataloging, and quietly governing this arm of the galaxy since before humans had figured out iron. The station surface was a layered architecture of pale stone and bioluminescent coral metal alloy that the Velhari called Sethrun, a material that stored memory the way wood stores rings. Every battle the station had witnessed was encoded in its walls. You could press your hand against a corridor and, if you were Velhari, feel the echoes of wars long finished. Dana couldn't feel any of that. She was human. She was also, as of 6 weeks ago, the first human instructor ever assigned to the Collective's Joint Cadet Program, a cross-species military training initiative that was less about combat and more about interoperability, about learning how different bodies, different nervous systems, different philosophies of conflict operated under pressure. The program's full name translated roughly to the School of Shared Breaking, the idea being that only by pushing each species to its limits in the presence of others could genuine alliance be built. Dana had been recommended by Admiral Torres, who had described her in the recommendation letter, which she wasn't supposed to have read but absolutely had, as uniquely qualified by temperament and history. Temperament meaning she didn't quit. History meaning she had reasons not to. She pulled her pack from the overhead rack as the ship docked. Inside the pack, 3 changes of clothes, a battered field notebook, 2 protein bars she'd been saving without knowing why, and a small photograph she kept face down. She didn't need much. She never had. The docking corridor was tall, nearly 5 meters, built for the Gareth, the largest species in the collective, who stood on average at 3.5 meters and moved with a slow, tectonic grace that made everything around them seem temporary. Dana had studied all 6 species during her 6-week briefing on Earth. She knew their physiologies, their cultural protocols, their stress responses, their combat traditions. Knowing and seeing, she was now learning, were 2 entirely different organs. The first cadet she saw was Velhari, the founding species, vaguely bilateral, with forearms arranged in 2 crossing pairs and a face that was mostly forehead, the sensory organs clustered low, near what would be the chin on a human. This one was young, standing in a group of 4 others, and when Dana walked past, the cadet said something to the group in Velhari standard that Dana's translation implant caught a half-second late. Smaller than the briefing images suggested. Another voice, a different cadet, Gareth, adolescent, the coral gray skin not yet fully hardened. I looked at the Earth training archives. The physical curriculum looks manageable. The first Velhari again. Manageable is generous. Repetitive, maybe. Dana didn't stop walking. She noted their voices. She noted their postures. She noted the particular quality of casual dismissal, young, unearned, architectural in the way only the very confident or the very sheltered can manage. She recognized it not because she'd been sheltered. She recognized it because she'd been dismissed her entire life and had developed an almost scientific sensitivity to its varieties. She filed it. She kept walking. Her quarters were small by station standards, enormous by her own. She'd grown up in a 2-room apartment in Tucson with her mother and, for a while, her brother Marcus, and she'd spent years sleeping in barracks and field tents and once, memorably, inside a drainage culvert for 11 days during a classified operation she still couldn't discuss. Space had never been what she needed. What she needed was a window. She had one. It looked out over the training grounds, a vast open arena carved directly into the Sethrun of the station's upper platform. The arena was roughly circular, about 400 meters across, with tiered observation decks surrounding it, and a floor that had been engineered to adapt to the specific needs of different physical training regimens. For the Gareth, it could harden to near diamond density to absorb impact. For the Orish, small, fast, 6-limbed, it could shift to a textured lattice that let them anchor and launch at high speed. For humans, it defaulted to something approximating packed Earth. This detail had been included in her briefing materials with a note that read, "Approximation based on limited Earth terrain data. Please advise if inaccurate." She had written back, "It's fine." What she hadn't written was, "It doesn't matter what the floor feels like. The floor is never the point." She unpacked slowly, putting things in their places with the particular deliberateness of someone who had learned the hard way that rituals of order were a form of self-maintenance. Clothes folded and stacked. Notebook on the desk, parallel to the edge. The photograph stayed face down in the inside pocket of her pack. Not yet. Not this room. She went to sleep early and dreamed about nothing, which was the best she usually got. In the morning, she met the cadets. There were 22 of them. For Velhari, 3 Gareth, 6 Orish, 4 of the species called Thenu, oceanic in origin, now adapted for atmospheric environments through a combination of biology and biotech, their skin a deep iridescent black that shifted color at the edges when they were emotional. 2 Hulvari, bilateral like humans, but with an extra joint in every limb, making their movements strangely, beautifully fluid. And 3 humans. 2 young men named Josh and Carter, fresh from basic, who looked at Dana with the focused respect of people who had read her file. And a young woman named Priya, who looked at Dana like she was trying to solve a math problem. Dana liked Priya immediately. She stood at the center of the arena and let them arrange themselves around her and said nothing for 90 seconds. This was intentional. Silence was information. What she wanted to see was who filled it, how fast, and with what. The Velhari cadets talked to each other. The Gareths stood still, patient. The Orish shifted restlessly, their 6 limbs making small adjustments, testing the floor. The Thenu's skin flickered at the edges. Curiosity, she'd learned, red as pale gold in their chromatophores. The Hulvari watched her with what she was coming to recognize as their species' default expression, attentive neutrality, like a tuning fork waiting for the right frequency. Josh and Carter stood at something approximating parade rest. Priya watched Dana with those problem-solving eyes. After 90 seconds, Dana spoke. "My name is Sergeant Dana Reeves. I'm from Earth. I'll be conducting your physical integration module for the next 14 weeks. She paused. Physical integration doesn't mean I'm going to teach you how to fight. You've all had combat training specific to your own species. What I'm going to do is teach you how to move through uncertainty. How to operate when your body is wrong, when it's tired, hurt, disoriented, or afraid. How to make decisions when your nervous system is lying to you." One of the Velhari cadets, the one from the docking corridor, she was almost certain, raised a lower left hand. "Sergeant." The Earth training archives were made available to cadets during the pre-assignment period. Based on our review of human physical training methodology, several of us have concerns about whether the curriculum will present sufficient. Sufficient what? Dana asked. A brief pause. Challenge. Dana nodded slowly. What's your name? Cadet Vethalaris. Vethalaris. Have you ever been afraid? The cadet's sensory cluster tightened slightly, a micro-expression she'd been briefed on. Mild offense. I've been in simulated combat scenarios That's not what I asked. Silence. We'll come back to it, Dana said. All of you warm up. Species-appropriate protocols. 20 minutes. I'll be watching. She watched them for the full 20 minutes and she didn't watch their technique. She watched their relationships to their own bodies. This was something she'd learned from a woman named Sergeant Ola Adeyemi, who had trained Dana when Dana was 19 and furious at everything and had told her, the body is not a tool. It's the conversation you're always having with yourself. When you know how to listen to it, you know everything. What she saw in 20 minutes was this. The Velhari cadets were precise, but inflexible. Their forearmed physiology gave them extraordinary rotational range, but they'd been trained to optimize, and optimization had made them predictable. They moved beautifully inside their known parameters, and she could see, watching them, exactly where their parameters ended. The Gareth were powerful in ways that didn't fully register as movement. They were more like geological events than athletes. Their training emphasized endurance over agility, which made sense for a species whose evolutionary history involved waiting out 100-year winters. But waiting was different from adapting. The Orish were spectacular, quick, creative, collaborative with each other in a way that suggested their species might not fully separate individual and group action even at the neurological level. She made a note. This would matter. The Thenu moved like water that had decided to be a soldier, graceful and continuous and deeply committed to flow. She wondered what happened when they were forced into positions that interrupted flow. She would find out. The Halvari were strange to watch, that extra joint giving their movement a quality she couldn't name for several minutes until it came to her. Delay. Not slowness. The extra joint created a microlag between intention and execution that in human movement would indicate hesitation. In them, it seemed to be something else. Something she wanted to understand. And then her 3 humans. Josh was strong and technically sound and held his fear of inadequacy in his shoulders, which rode a centimeter too high at all times. Carter was faster than he knew and moved with an ease that suggested he'd grown up physical, sports probably, or manual work, but he second-guessed himself. Priya moved like she was conserving something, like she had a budget she was managing. Careful, deliberate, nothing wasted. Dana watched Priya the longest. When the 20 minutes ended, she called them in. Tomorrow morning, she said, we start. Come prepared to be wrong about something you're confident in. Vethalaris said, almost too quietly to be translated, I don't think I'll need to be. Dana heard it. She said nothing. She was very good at saving things. The first week, Dana didn't teach them anything new. She took everything away. Monday, she had each cadet perform their most trained movement sequence, the thing they were best at, the core of their physical identity, and she filmed it and she played it back for the entire group, and she found one single flaw in each, and only discussed the flaw. Not to humiliate. To locate. This is the edge of your known world. This is where you stop. The Velhari cadets were, as a group, most disturbed by this. Their training culture was built around mastery display, showing what you had perfected. Having the perfected thing examined for its single imperfection was, culturally, close to an insult. Vethalaris' skin, a pale amber, Velhari standard, went briefly darker during the playback of a sequence. Darkening, she'd been briefed, indicated controlled anger. She noted it and moved on. Tuesday, she blindfolded them. All species-appropriate sensory deprivation. Gareth wore acoustic dampeners because their primary navigation was seismic vibration. Orish had their tactile feet pads covered. The Thenu, whose primary environmental reading came from a lateral sense organ that detected pressure differentials, were placed in a still air chamber that gave them nothing. Then she asked them to walk across the arena floor in a straight line. None of them did. The Orish came closest because their 6 limbs gave them redundant proprioceptive data. But none of them walked straight. This is day 2, Dana said when they were done. You can't walk straight in the dark. That's not an insult. That's information. The question is, what do you do with information that makes you feel incompetent? Silence. One of the human cadets, Carter, said, You figure out why. You figure out why, Dana agreed. Not so you can fix it today. So you can know what you're actually working with. Wednesday through Friday was more of the same systematic, deliberate introduction to limitation. She had them run until form broke down, then filmed the breakdown. She had them solve physical problems, how to move a weighted object across the arena without using their dominant limbs. She had them pair with species they'd never touched, never worked alongside, and complete a task that required contact. The contact sessions were the most revealing. Humans and Gareth couldn't partner effectively because the scale difference made most shared tasks impossible without a restructure of the task itself, which was exactly what she wanted them to realize. Velhari and Orish kept getting their limbs tangled in ways that would have been funny in any other context, and were still a little funny in this one. She didn't smile. Priya smiled. Dana noticed that Priya smiled not at the cadets but at the problem itself, like someone who genuinely enjoyed the shape of a difficult thing. At the end of the first week, Vethalaris said to her, not confrontationally, genuinely, I don't understand the structure of what we're doing. Good, Dana said. What you do when you don't understand the structure of something. The cadet considered this. Gather data until the structure becomes apparent. That's one way, Dana said. There's another. She didn't give it to him. She let him carry the question. On the 9th day, Priya knocked on her door at 2100 hours. Dana opened it. Priya was holding 2 cups of something that smelled like tea, but almost certainly wasn't. Station Galley was experimenting, Priya said. It's probably fine. Dana let her in. They sat on opposite sides of the desk and drank the thing that was probably fine. It tasted like cardamom and metal and, strangely, rain, and Priya said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "The photograph you keep face down. In your pack." Dana looked at her. "I'm not trying to." Priya stopped. "I noticed it during load-in. You moved it carefully, like it was something that needed to not see things." Dana was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into the pack and took out the photograph and set it face up on the desk between them. It was a picture of a man, mid-30s, dark-skinned, laughing at something off-camera, wearing the uniform of the Earth Coalition's Forward Deployment Corps. His eyes were the same shape as Dana's. "My brother Marcus," she said. "He died in a training accident 4 years ago. Spinal injury during a high-altitude insertion exercise. He was 31. Priya looked at the photograph for a moment. "I'm sorry. He was better than me," Dana said. It came out simple, factual. Stronger, faster, better instincts. He was the one who was supposed to. She stopped. Recalibrated. He always said training was where you found out who you actually were. Not combat. Training. Because in training you can't hide behind adrenaline. You just have to be there. Priya nodded. "The reason I keep it face down," Dana said, "is not because I can't look at it. It's because I don't want to look at it when I'm not ready. When I'm ready, I look at it. He reminds me why this matters." Priya wrapped her hands around the cup. "Is that why you took this assignment? The furthest possible posting from Earth?" Dana almost smiled. "Partly. Also because Torres said it would be hard, and I needed it to be hard." "Why?" "Because when it's hard enough, I stop thinking about what I should have done differently." Priya was quiet. "Then, he wouldn't have wanted you to think that." "No," Dana agreed. "He wouldn't. He also would have had 50 opinions about Kathmaros, and every single one of them would have been delivered at full volume while doing something physically inadvisable." She looked at the photograph. "He would have loved this place." She turned it face down again. Carefully. "Tomorrow," she said, "I'm going to start pushing harder. Tell Josh to stop carrying his fear in his shoulders. He probably won't listen to me yet, but he might listen to you." Priya nodded. At the door, she paused. "Sergeant, what's the other way? When you don't understand the structure of something. You told Bethalaris there was another way besides gathering data." Dana looked at her. "You move through it anyway and let the structure reveal itself from the inside." Priya thought about this. "That's terrifying." "Yeah," Dana said. "That's the whole lesson." Week 3. The Arena, 0600. Dana had spent 2 days designing what she was about to show them, and she'd spent those 2 days with a particular quality of focus that felt, from the inside, like assembling something from parts that didn't know they belonged together yet. The move had no name. She'd been developing the concept for 11 years, since she was 22, and a young Sergeant Adeyemi had put her through a drill so disorienting that Dana had done something unprecedented in response. A full-body reactive sequence that had combined a controlled fall, a pivot generated entirely from core rotation without hip involvement, and a recovery that used the falling momentum forward rather than canceling it. Adeyemi had stopped the drill, made her do it again, and then said, "What was that?" Dana had said, "I don't know. I was wrong, and then I was right." Adeyemi had written a note. Dana had kept developing the sequence. It had taken years because she'd had to learn the theory underneath it, the biomechanics of nonlinear recovery, the relationship between acknowledged imbalance and redirected force, the psychology of the practitioner, which mattered more than the physics. Because the move couldn't be done by someone trying not to fall. It could only be done by someone who had fully committed to falling, who had, in the moment of imbalance, stopped fighting the loss of center and started using it. She'd never had the right audience for it. She'd shown it to Marcus once. He'd watched it 3 times and then said, "That's not a fighting technique. That's a philosophy, with a body attached." She stood at the center of the arena. 22 cadets in a loose ring at 15 meters. "I'm going to show you something," she said. "I want you to watch it once without analyzing it. Just watch." She let herself begin to fall. It looked, for the first half-second, like a simple stumble. Her left foot caught wrong, her center of mass shifting too far forward, the kind of thing that ended in a hard landing for most bodies. Every cadet in the ring had the same instinctive response, the slight lean, the readiness to wince. Then Dana stopped fighting it. The shift happened from the core, not a correction but a completion. She let the fall become a rotation, not around her vertical axis, but a diagonal one that had no obvious anchor point, her body describing an arc that was technically a fall throughout its entire length and technically a controlled movement throughout its entire length. The pivot at the bottom used the full accumulated rotational force of the fall and added a directional conversion. Instead of her hitting the ground became a push point, and she came up 3 meters to the left of where she'd started, low, perfectly balanced, facing the opposite direction. The whole sequence, 2 seconds. She stood up. The arena was silent. Then something happened that she hadn't anticipated. The floor fractured, not catastrophically, not structurally, but the sethrun beneath where she'd executed the pivot, where the fall's force had converted and discharged into the floor, showed a hairline crack in a radial pattern, spreading maybe 40 centimeters from the point of contact. The sethrun did not crack. That was, as far as anyone in the building was concerned, not a thing that happened. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then the station's structural AI activated overhead lighting that Dana had never seen turn on before, a deep amber band around the arena's upper rim, and a tone sounded, and 3 Velhari station administrators were at the arena's edge within 4 minutes. They moved quickly, which for Velhari, who were deliberate in all things, meant something significant had happened. Dana stood at the center of the crack and waited. The senior administrator, a Velhari elder whose extra centuries of age showed in the deepened color of the amber skin and the increased density of the forehead's sensory cluster, came to her. Not aggressively. There was something in the approach that Dana read, after a moment, as awe, which confused her. "Instructor Reeves," the elder said. The translation came through clean, formal. "What you did. Can you explain the methodology?" "It's a recovery technique I've been developing. It converts falling momentum into a discharge pattern," the elder said. "Yes, we see that." A pause. "Instructor, are you aware of what the sethrun records? Force events, battles, all kinetic events of sufficient." The elder paused, choosing words carefully, philosophical weight. Dana looked down at the crack. "I don't understand. The sethrun has recorded every significant physical event in this station for 300 years. In that time, it has cracked 17 times. Each crack marks an event that the material classified as a transition point, a moment when something that was previously impossible became possible." The elder looked at the crack. "It does not crack for strength. Gareth have trained here for a century, and their impacts far exceed yours. It does not crack for speed. It does not crack for technique." A pause. "We have never identified exactly what it cracks for. Only that when it does, something has shifted." Dana was quiet. "The previous crack," the elder said, "occurred 41 years ago, during a joint exercise. A Thenu cadet, facing complete sensory failure during a deep-water simulation, stopped trying to reorient and instead navigated using the disorientation itself. She later became the architect of the collective's crisis response doctrine." The elder looked at Dana. "What do you call what you did?" Dana thought about Marcus, about Adeyemi, about 11 years of working on something that had no name because she'd never found a name that was honest enough. "I call it being wrong in the right direction," she said. The elder was still for a long moment. Then, "That is a very human description." "Yeah," Dana said. "I know." She turned back to the cadets, who were standing in their loose ring, exactly where they'd been, not a single one having moved during the entire exchange. 22 faces, or the species-appropriate equivalent of faces, looking at her with a quality of attention she hadn't seen in the 2 weeks prior. Not because she'd cracked the floor, because they'd seen the crack come from a fall. She sent the administrators away, and she stood in front of the cadets, and she told them the truth. "I didn't crack the floor on purpose," she said. "I've performed that sequence hundreds of times. It's never done that. I don't know what the floor was responding to, and I'm not going to pretend I do." She let that land. "What I can tell you is what I was doing when I did it." She looked at Bethalaris. 2 weeks ago you asked me what we were doing. I told you the other way to handle not understanding a structure was to move through it and let it reveal itself from the inside. That's what the technique is. That's its entire operating principle. You stop negotiating with your own loss of balance. You stop trying to be right again. You commit to being wrong, completely, without reservation, and you find out what wrong has to offer. Bethalaris's skin was neither darker nor lighter. He was listening. "That is difficult for me to do," he said. "Not defensively. Factually. I know. It's difficult for everyone. It was difficult for me for years. It is still difficult for me." She looked at the photograph-shaped awareness in the back of her mind, the face-down rectangle. "There are losses I haven't committed to fully yet. Things I keep trying to be right about that I should let fall." A breath. Knowing the technique doesn't make you immune to the psychology. It just gives you somewhere to put the physics when the psychology is ready. The Thenu cadet, she'd learned the name, Saravel, had gone full gold at the edges. Deep, warm gold. The translation of that particular shade, she'd looked up, a recognition of something previously known but not previously understood. "The curriculum changes today," Dana said. "We're not drilling techniques anymore. We're drilling the willingness to fail completely in the presence of others. Every session from here forward is going to require you to attempt something you cannot yet do, in front of every species in this ring, and to fail at it without recovery, and then to fail again, and then again, until the failure starts teaching you something." She paused. "The hardest part won't be the physical challenge. The hardest part will be failing in front of each other. Because you are from different species with different honor cultures and different physiological responses to vulnerability, and every single one of those cultures has built sophisticated systems for not showing failure to outsiders." She looked around the ring. "Those systems kept your species alive. I'm not disrespecting them. But you are here to build an alliance that has to function when everything is broken and the systems don't work and you are the only thing between each other and whatever is coming. And you cannot do that if you have never seen each other be genuinely, irreversibly wrong." Silence. Josh's shoulders were lower than they'd been in 2 weeks. Carter was crying, not sobbing, a single slow track down his right cheek that he made no move to wipe away. Priya was nodding. Slowly, continuously, like a person confirming something they'd suspected for a long time. "We start tomorrow," Dana said. "Rest today. Think about what you're most afraid of getting wrong. That's where we're starting." The crack never repaired. Station protocols required structural assessment of any Sethron fracture, and the assessment came back the same way all 17 previous assessments had. Material integrity uncompromised. Fracture is non-structural. Classification. Record. The station didn't fix its records. It kept them. Over the following 11 weeks, Dana worked with 22 cadets through the most physically and psychologically demanding training curriculum she had ever designed, and she redesigned it continuously as she learned, as the cadets taught her things about movement and threshold and endurance that no human had ever had the opportunity to learn, because no human had ever stood in this specific arena with this specific collection of bodies and been willing to be wrong about everything she thought she knew about how physical beings moved through fear. The Orish, it turned out, didn't separate individual and group sensation neurologically. They shared proprioceptive data through microvibration in their leg pads. When Dana understood this, she built a session around it, asked the Orish cadets to share that sense with the group by teaching the others what they were feeling. It was, unexpectedly, the session that broke open the interspecies communication problem most completely. You could not stay distant from someone who was showing you how their feet felt. The Halvari's microlag, she finally understood, wasn't hesitation. It was consideration, a quarter-second gap in which the nervous system ran a probability calculation before committing to movement. They couldn't turn it off. But they could learn to use it. During that quarter second, in a situation of extreme stress, they could input new information and adjust. Their bodies had a reevaluation window that other species didn't. She spent a week building drills to help them access that window consciously rather than being caught by it. Bethalaris broke on day 49. Not dramatically. Not visibly. He failed a partnered fall drill with Carter for the 6th consecutive time, and he sat down on the arena floor in the particular Velhari posture of acknowledged overwhelm. Lower arms extended, upper arms crossed over the thorax, and he stayed there for 4 minutes while the drill continued around him. Dana watched and said nothing. At the end of 4 minutes, he stood up and asked Carter to run the drill again.
He didn't get it that day.
He got it 3 days later. When he got it, Dana watched his skin do something she'd never seen Velhari skin do in any of her briefing materials. It went almost white for 2 seconds, then flooded back to amber. She asked the station's cultural liaison about it afterward. "That's not in the standard glossary," the liaison said. "That's something old. Pre-collective. It's called Vethalin. Roughly, the color that comes after the fall." She filed it away. She was always filing things away. On the last day, she stood at the center of the arena one more time and looked at 22 cadets who were not the 22 cadets who had stood in this ring 14 weeks ago. Not because they were transformed, she disliked that word, its implication of clean before and after. They were continuous. They were the same people who had arrived, carrying all the same things they'd arrived carrying, plus now they also carried this. She didn't make a speech. She took the photograph out of her pack. She held it up. Not to show them. Not as a gesture. Just to look at it herself, in their presence, in the place where she'd spent 14 weeks practicing exactly what she'd been asking of them. Marcus was still laughing at something off camera. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "You're done. Go do something inadvisable." It was, she would reflect later, the most purely true thing she had ever said at the end of anything. The crack in the Sethrun floor was still there when the next cohort arrived 6 months later. The new intake walked past it on their way in, and most of them didn't notice it. One did. A young Velhari cadet, first generation of her family to join the joint program, crouched down and pressed her sensory cluster close to the material, the way you did when you wanted to feel what the stone remembered. She stayed there for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked into the arena and waited for class to begin.